Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Roundweather's first reading. Welcome to, the meeting of the poems of Brenda Hillman and Daniela Naomi Molnar. My name's Chris Kerr, and I'm the director of this nonprofit gallery. And rather than kind of eat up some of our precious time to tell you an introduction with their accolades and hometowns and universities, I thought I'd just tell you, just briefly note how important these poets are to this space and its mission. So Brenda Hillman may not know this, but outside of family and close friends, you're the first person who believed in this gallery and this mission, and was the first person to say, yes, I'll be an advisory board member, which basically means helps nominates which environmental nonprofits get a lot of the money from the art sold here. And I've just been growing for decades through your poetry, more than most living poets. I just want to throw that out there. And I don't know, you basically given me the conviction that poetry is the most important form of writing and the most similar to ecology, and that I think we'll see more of it coming to help us adapt to where we are now. And Daniela was one of the first shows here, and is the first out-of-towner artist who let me hold on to art afterwards to continue trying to give her eco insights, connect them further into the world. So thank you for that. And I think we'll see she's just an exemplar of how poetry and painting reach for each other. And I just wanted to really thank you guys, from all over, because your work really helps me have this conviction that it's art that needs to be centered by humanity as we adapt to and mitigate the climate crisis. I don't think we can do it right without it. So thank you for being here and being on Earth right now, because we need you. And I also want to thank Evan Karp for doing the audio and visual, and I wanted to thank Jason Francisco for snapping photographs and documenting the show, and want to thank you all for being here, and especially some of the other out-of-towners who came in, because this reading is it's a celebration and a experiment. We are celebrating the newish release of both Brenda's and Daniela's new books. And I don't know, I just kind of want to wave them and let them receive your applause. Just, here they go. Woo. Yeah, and so while we're celebrating, this is also an experiment in interdependence. As is the climate crisis, I guess. And it's an experiment in interdependence in that our poets are going to be reading poems chosen right now, based in, I don't know, what they ate an hour ago, based in ideally what they heard a moment ago from the other. And to start it off, Daniela was good enough to let me just choose a poem. And so our first poem, it's on page 61, and I chose it because it has storm in the title, and we were all expecting this big heavy-duty storm. So on that note of stormness and absenceness and these wonderful Brendas and Danielas, I'd like you to just like really warmly welcome Daniela to the mic. Yay.
Thank you, Chris. Can you all hear me? Should I change the mic? Okay, great. I'm so honored and delighted to be here reading with you all. So thank you for showing up. This is a sunny day in Portland. This is what we call good weather. But I was gonna read this poem anyway because it starts out thinking about my friend who is sitting right here in the second row, my friend Roy. So, sorry to call you out, Roy, but. So this is, this book incorporates words of other poets, other writers, other thinkers, journalists, scientists. And when you read the book, other people's words are italicized and then credited at the end. But I'm not gonna like stop and tell you every time it's a quote while I'm reading because that would be clunky and ruin it. But it is, I do think of the book as a kind of ecology of voices in that way. Chorus 21, Ojito Canyon, Storm. I dream of my friend on his island, his view of the ocean's heft, origin whipped wind, touchable, unknown. He sees an upturned bell of water trying still to ring. His life moves into memory, all his paintings pressed with precision into storage space. Morning sky like an absent-minded, gentle touch. The clouds' pink fingers trace the sky's blue back. Driven by a soft motor other than a mind. Yesterday, 2 signs on my hike will flood without warning. Are we ever warned of the flood? Do we ever know what is overtaking us or when we'll be overtaken? Preceding that, all within is protected. Every man, every woman carries a firmament inside, and the stars in it are not the stars in the sky. All within is protected, tunneling through entropy like memory of the Lincoln Tunnel, orange sodium lights every 23 feet, traffic unmoving as always, horns, a jut of citizenry below the water's weight. I wonder about air, scarcity of. I wonder about bombs, about heat sensors and checkpoints and skin color and skin, inside skin of lungs, formerly pink, caked with exhaust and mold, lungs suspended between states, New Jersey, New York, water, air, real below dream, below dream, below dream. Every passenger in every car, a separate anxious language. Every idling car carrying within an expectation of arrival, an awareness that arrival will continue to recede. No one wants to catch anyone else's eyes through the auto glass, though we sit unmoving, close enough to touch, captive in a woven cove of ordinary strange. A fragile imaginal cloth holds the tunnel down, holds us all as traffic. Traffic, to touch repeatedly, to break. A fragile imaginal cloth holds us, unbudging chasms, full of desire to be not present, to be not visible, to be not seen through the autoglass. Binary ratcheting up. Everything arrives energetically at first. I keep finding songbirds' rumps, tail feathers dusted red, wing feathers spread, what flesh there is eaten or rearrayed by time. The storm brought the songbirds down. The songbird is and is not a metaphor. The songbird is and is not gone. To feel is to give oneself over to matter's metaphor, to relinquish doubt's spin for a spell. I feel a bird on a power line look down at me. Another storm approaches like a cougar threading through rock, dis or reappearing when and how she decides. The songbirds brought down the storm. I'll read another one from the same location. The book starts in Portland, where I live, and moves to Ojito Canyon, which is a very remote canyon in New Mexico, and then goes back to Portland. So we'll stay in Ojito Canyon for a minute. Chorus 14, Ojito Canyon, not self. Each day, reseal the seal between self and not self badly, so it's porous, fidgets or shimmers when asked to stay quiet, when asked to stay contained. He's dark water, unstill, seeped into me, total hunger, total surrender. The body is infinite, slept behind him soundly, listening to the rain. The materiality of the body is one way to get free. The begonia leaf, another. Sun on iridescence, warmth, connection, food. The desert's quiet methods for storing all that falls. This land of habitable scars in which I try to see convictions as they taper. I watch all discernibles turn cureless, scatter, clash. In a field, I am the absence of field, or the field is also me, and I am also the field, which means in a field, I am the presence of field, and the perception of field, and the field felt by field, and the field seen and smelled by field, the field known by field, as paltry and honest and knowing as knowing can be, which is a type of love, a type of killing, a type of warmth, connection, food, a type of conviction, a stray fold, a tension ironed until crisp. Another sunrise, and this canyon cups the light into gold. Roof rust is written, a story told through precipitate and ice. I fixate on the roof's rivets, each an arced galaxy, each a silver dome holding a circle of captive sun. As a co-metabolic mammal, I peer into a mirrored spring whenever I try to see. So much for the autonomous and pure, so much for the conjuring of lonely breakage all removes, so much for the eye as a hollow in our shared tensile web. That old battlefield's gruesome cipher has nothing that needs now to be told. Cease your lonely winter, soul warrior, lay it down. When I felt, as a child, a sense of the not self entering my perception, I felt it as a comfort, not an assault. When I saw the men praying, their suit-clad dark backs rocking to and fro, eyes closed, muttering Aramaic to smooth books in worn hands. I knew that their eyes were rolled back in their skulls, seeing into that density, the brain's many banishments and conjurings, a neural map of shrapnel restoration, a technology of hunger and hunger's reprieve. And maybe I'll just read one more short one, which is the first poem in the book. So we're in Portland, but we're kind of everywhere in this poem. Chorus 1, air. Bare inside skin, trachea, alveoli, wet hole, need, brokers, air, air, air declares you are not free. Other scenes are not taking place. Time is not filled. Time is not late. Bodies are scraps, rented, meant to be returned, war over.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I told Chris I couldn't imagine anybody was going to come out with a storm like on its way. But and I don't even know a lot of you. So that's an additional honor. So yeah, Chris really named our connection that when I heard that he had this idea of a gallery that would just try to bring the intersectionality of environmentalism and, kind of cutting edge art, I thought, wow, that's just such a great idea. So thank you for supporting it. It's really great. And thank you for supporting it on a night like this. And thank you to Daniela for a beautiful book and beautiful reading. So our idea was just to switch back and forth and to sort of play off of each other. I've almost never done this in like thousands of readings. I'm normally like plan everything and time it, so it's very, very different for me. I'll start with a really old poem. I think that's not my phone, but I don't actually mind cell phones going off. So this is a very old book, Bright Existence, and so I was hearing the self and the not self, and I'm going to read a poem about a storm and just kind of going off of. So the plum trees are just out in Berkeley, and there's a series of poems in here about just right after a divorce, not feeling that you almost don't exist. So this was written almost 40 years ago. Blossoms appearing in the pause between, no, wait. Between winter and the time you greeted it, plum blossoms everywhere. Always in this season there was this black self-conscious eye above the landscape, one feverish plucked 40s eyebrow arched like a fermata in music, watching the modern variations in pink all the way down Euclid Avenue. Then dizzy and with what hope you managed your predicament, not to lose your shadow to the shared delirium of each tree. One day it came to you, spring cried as you turned the numb soil, earthworms twisted warm cuneiform bodies arching up in something. If it was not delight, it was so much like delight, and a rusty robin landed slowly as an old biplane, shook the branch, and all the blossoms fell on you deliciously. It was not sorrow. Then you knew for the bird, as for you, the world split open was stunningly beautiful, though being alive was nearly impossible. Every life. And right before daybreak, the little owl returned, 2 small solid O's like napkin holders. Then the briefer, brighter O's of another bird of prey, not a victim, came across the field to welcome her. Dawn has 4 stages. In the 3rd, everything chooses how much more it will become. Until then, the door is the same color as the hinge. Poems fit into other poems. Every life fits into every life, bright into dark, not deciding. After that, the wall notices the shadow pulled out of the soul, gray as a Puritan, and the brave, dreamy hyacinth starts to be seen. Could the garden have said to the gardener, I made you grow? They were beside one another. Could that which was not yet press forward in the world? It seemed for a brief time it could. So I thought I'd read a storm poem, since Daniela started with a storm poem. I have a form that I use sometimes, which is just counting words per line instead of metrics. So I count 4 words per line. Sometimes I count syllabics or other things, but this poem has 4 words per line. It's called Pacific Storms, and it's from a book called Practical Water. Baffled dread one day, hope the next. Hope shifts, dread returns, then that also lifts. Sometimes in California, hearing sentences like, the storm gates have opened, or storms have lined up out into the Pacific, you experience a cheerful scraping between depression and what's here, in Portuguese, saudades. There's no English equivalent. Crows over coast live oaks, laurel saplings covered with lichen veils in oak grass fields. The moon is in gort, Celts might say. Ivy dies, clinging. You drive along thinking of a friend who has forgiven you. Vineyards very gold, that gold of school pencils. It's really an autumn poem, but I wanted to do the storm. And let's see, there's one I wanted to read from. This book is called Extra Hidden Life Among the Days. So I wrote 4 books on the elements, and I'm working on 4 books about time. This is a book about days. And it's called Angrily Standing Outside in the Wind, and it would be, I guess, what you'd call an environmental poem. Sometimes I teach out at St. Mary's, and sometimes I get to school and I've just been thinking with fury about the news. And I just get out and I just want to scream at the trees. Angrily standing outside in the wind. Kept losing self-control, but how could one lose the self after reading so much literary theory? The shorter I stood under the cork trees, the taller I remained rather passive. The Brendas were angry at the greed, angry that the trees would die, had lost interest in the posturing of the privileged, the gaps between can't and won't. Stood outside the gate of permissible sound, and the wind came soughing through the doubt debris. Soughing comes from swag, to resound. Echo actually comes from this also. We thought of old Hegel across the sea, the Weltgeist, and clouds went by like the bones of a Kleenex. It's too late for countries, but it's not too late for trees, and the wind kept soughing with its sound sash, wind with its sound sash, increasing bold wind with its sound sash, increasing bold. So I'll read one more from this set. So this is called The Times We Find Ourselves In. And it really refers to gun violence. The times we find ourselves in. Laws were not working, so we went outside after the shootings, the latest shootings. Mountain Creek full of summer runoff, 2 centuries after Whitman's birth. The bullshit Congress not in session. That is so not respectful, Brenda. Aspen and media roots, veritable congresses, ridged, halted radials. Light dragged the minutes down. Couldn't not think of the shooter's mother. Couldn't not think of dead children's hair. Couldn't not think of the gun at the gun show. But actually, Walt, we did not suffer. We were not there. The problem with walking outdoors in America, besides some youths may be shot at any time, so little holds the ground together. It's very crumbly right now. Mountain mosses hold it lengthwise and clockwise. Colors, albeit stressed, as we are. Saw reddish gold ones, granitic, apex, and dry shoot, and over them extremely fluttering migrating tortoiseshells, ovate, vacant spots resisting their flight, spoke of great beings not listed in the guidebook. Their making might go on somehow, a law of misty, rootless process, a kind of light that comes from below.
Thank you, Brenda. This is a really hard game. This is like advanced poetry game. I'm gonna read a poem that's not in the book that was inspired by one of the things I love most and have admired for so long about your poetry is the way that you use sound, and it's inspired my poetry heavily. So this is a poem that also counts words per line and relies primarily on sound, and it's a very new poem in which I'm rewriting the Jewish prayer that you recite after someone has died, the Kaddish, which is a very chutzpah thing to do, but I'm doing it anyway. Kaddish 3. Slacken the hallow, billow the place, skull the bloom, ocean the life, slacken the name, river the vein, slacken the billow, fluent the node, puddle or harbor or sound. Slacken the place, swell the hallow, song the source, braid the billow, slacken the name, unknot the skull, node the pith, bloom the soil, stone or mountain or spit. Slacken the other, slacken the us, slacken the I, slacken the task, slacken the air, slacken the name, billow the name, node the place, lung or storm or vent. Maybe the seed, maybe the flesh, maybe the mud, maybe the firth, maybe the mouth, maybe the moon, maybe the us, maybe the gold, maybe the ash. Slacken the word, skull the space, billow the spool, blood the wide, hum the one. I'm going to read one more that's not in the book that's from the same series. That I've tried for my entire life to write a funny poem, and I can't do it. You write funny poems, but this is about as close as I might come. There's like a little bit of lightness in this poem. Kaddish 4. The whole surface grammar eating sun, face the faceless one. Have you seen nothing, see you? Everywhere, everything, everyone, eyes of the faceless one. Asphalt puddle eye, high. Can you feel held by being seen? Can the scene calm your sight? Can you let the scene pry? Can you be its prey, looking back? High, a stone's compass eye. High, the predator who hides inside the sun. The faceless gathered all the waters. Fire flocked to every hollow, made sight. I'm going to read one that is a love poem to water, because you've written so beautifully about the elements. So this is inspired by that. Chorus 13, Ojito Canyon, Seam. Past moonset, pre-sunrise, stars poised on dark hills. Alone yesterday on a mesa, eating handfuls of thirsty snow, juniper parched and seeking, a water ghost, a slow writhing thing, engraving water's name, a continuous seeking I. Pink wisps now in pale cerulean sky, hills indigo and umber. This white far, this breath, this blue far, this breathing, this pink far, this breath, this black far, this edge, this gray far, this lip, this fold of each body, a map of contact, of relinquishment and hold. I drift out from the canyon's inlet, trace again the world with sight. I try to see my own edges, trace where I become all else, to feel the me and the not me align in that reprise, as when and otherwise opens in the body. I split along the seam of my own perfect damage, like a rock in a riverbed, cracked by water's scrutiny, water's dash, water's deletions, its radical excisions, its unsealing, its tunneling, its certain tongue, water's irregular questions, water's habitable script. Water's eyes reeling, water's eyes contriving, bewildered, this slender breakage and drift, glimpses are signatures, the ghosts live me. The flag in the valley maps the wind, like my eyes map the seam of me moving. I was taught to sew seams in a second-story room, the smallest in the house, in a brownstone in Queens. Running my fingertips along the skeins of embroidery thread again and again to feel their silky colors touch my skin, listening to the spin of the black iron sewing machine spinning, spinning, and the closet with its torn plastic bags of fabric scraps, all potentials, no plan, just belief. My grandmother's beaten hands guiding the machine that could join or sunder, that could script a strong, pliant unity of two separate things or could tear into a hand, that could patch or puncture and must puncture in order to patch. No seam without the 1,000 tiny holes to hold the thread. The black thread, the white thread, the red thread, the green, tan, brown, violet, yellow, pink, the blue thread, the pale blue, the dark blue, thread to match the fabric it remade, stitches meant to be unseen. And unlike the stitches in a wound which vanish into skin's inherent holding, these stitches stayed, binding matter to itself, making folded form, to clothe and warm a body, to contain. All right, I'll read one more, which I'm back in Portland in this poem, not particularly happy about it, which will be clear. Chorus 36, Traffic. The war began far away, but soon entered our ears. The war was just down the street when it began to move my face into shapes I could not read. The war found in me a puppet and a stage. The war played, the war stayed. The war ate anything that resembled silence, ate birds too, the tiny ones first, downy gray feathers still matted with fog. But soon the goshawks and the egrets, even the albatross, her acreaged wings. Disappearance tumbled over itself to disappear. What is the part of us that feels it isn't named, that doesn't know how to respond to any name? The jay pecking the black rocks expects to have hands, expects hands every day, is bewildered by her blue wings, surprised by how they offer freedom, but disallow holding or being firmly held. Surprised, too, by the efficacy of her wings as tools for making distance, the way they slice precisely into air in order to be of it. I try to close. This must be done to avoid being named. A scant mile from my house, the pre-dawn highway blares its sound into the dark, a raucous void of noise. The sound swallows, tamps, and hollows. Birds shift the timbre of their songs, copy their captor's sound. The sound sounds a clear instruction: leave. There exist ways of listening the listener hardly understands. You don't need to know what is right in order to move steadily toward it. All the ways I've tried to love this place, the plants rooted here, returning each year, metronome perception swung far out.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. Thank you to Evan too for recording it. I am very hesitant to have poetry readings on the internet because I like to shoot my mouth off between my poems, but so I'm always afraid of now it's up there for good. Okay, so the first thing I thought of, I have to read something that's not in the book. So this is a fairly new poem. It's certainly since the book, and it has things that I am not sure I can pronounce. I like to put a lot of botanical things in my poems and really be irreverent with science. So this is my mom. I grew up in Tucson, and my mom had to be moved from her house after my dad died, and her house stands empty. And we go back and visit it, but I wrote this about that. She's still alive. She's 98. She lives in Princeton. To mycorrhiza under our mother's garden, hyphal tubes, symbionts, exudates, glomalin proteins, pre-soil, prevent the leaking out. Fluttered root tips of padded prickly pear, sand under anxious days, enzymes, gilgos, patched necromasses under her clothesline, keep spirit close. Beneath feldspar, red-boled mica, nets of roots, fate kept not death fungal sheets, steady there. Abiotic mediators, ones toward all. Crawling now, word open cells, Pleistocene enriched molecules where rhizospheres stayed still. Days of salts, stomata, pores in leaves. Dirt with furry prizes turned zero clouds where chores were done to branch near places she had moods, mendings, sewed buttons on. Ectomycorrhizal fungi mend her there, her here, mend moods here. Pink beige mold moods stay the feet. Forgetters, spun threaders, where dots and arcs host sugars. Ampersands of storage compounds weaving loves. Carbon allocators, microessays of endomycorrhizae, dappled net of never seen, don't. Light carriers don't forget. Fungal tracers hold back below. Tubes and branches, microbe, niche of ground, don't forget her, earth that held her up. And Daniela mentioned her grandmother in a poem, so I really how to connect. So I'm about to, my daughter's about to give birth to her third son, and this is when her first little son was born, and the Oakland Marathon was about to happen. To Leon, born before the marathon. He was born at Kaiser Oakland, where his mom was born too. When you were born, they fell in love with sleep. Doves delivered the 5 wax notes. A pointed moon brought in its radiance. Some were strapping distance on their feet as you cried out among the architectures, month of the fiddlehead, hound's tongue, colt's foot, month of the normal rains. And though earth is somewhat tired of the new, there would never not be news again. Tall, wild stalks circled the lake, stirring, shouting into the street. A little gray trash scattered, and when the runners finally passed, rebel seeds had joined an auxiliary race. You brought two kinds of hours into days. One kind was blank, one had your expression on its face. And I thought I'd read two kinds of love poems because Daniela had some love poem references, and love poems to place are really hard. And love poems to people who are at the edge of their life are hard. So this is, if I can find it, a love poem to a friend who passed away from cancer. A pattern of minutes during illness. Our friend, this is a new book, in a few minutes before later, and it's got a moldy orange on the front. A pattern of minutes during illness. Our friend was struggling with her cancer while her calm met extremes in the brain, below the follicles of hair setting in, or into the arms of others, while her body that had often been joyful rejected the celebrated chemicals. She didn't glamorize a so-called acceptance process, but kept moving through the rounded minutes of her days, as bees in her yard of double-faced roses sped into a wheel of notches at the center of time, or into the time at the center of each rose. It wasn't that our friend had grown wiser, she just didn't choose to spare, and sometimes she had better days or skipped whole segments in ways we couldn't understand, as if she worked on an abstract pattern for her friends. No individual piece made sense, but there were arrangements to be made among humans, and she was committed to making them. And I'm going to read a poem. I'll read two more poems. This one is this one is a prose poem, and Daniela works a lot with hybrid forms in a really beautiful way in her pieces. And this poem is, I have a lot of sort of what is sort of so-called activism that I do out of despair, just because you can't not. So one of the things I do with my students is I take them out and we read poetry in unlikely places, like at oil refineries and stuff, just to take poetry out into untoward spaces. So this is one of those, and there's some text corruptor in it, where I just wrote something in the poem and then I put it through a text corruptor, so it looks like squiggles on the page. It's like, so I'm just going to say that when I get to the text corruptor. And it also has some pictures of our doing our action. Report on another encounter in nature. After the EPA began to unravel, some students and I went to read what used to be called nature poetry at a shopping center wearing Russian gas masks we had purchased on the internet. The students were brave. We were surrounded by grassy hills with so-called invasive species. There was a little buzzing from the edge of the universe. We felt everything intensely. Phrases sliced through the minutes, then moved away through space. At the Safeway, a man came up to us, older white guy, and asked what we were doing there. I said we were reading nature poetry outdoors because of what was happening to the EPA. He said, We would have to take our protest elsewhere. I said we were here as part of an ecology class. He said he owned the Safeway and we would have to leave. I looked at his Volvo, its gas tank full of screaming dead animals from the Cretaceous, a warm geologic period of shallow inland seas, a phrase I've always found comforting. We moved our reading a few yards away to some not dirty western dirt full of not yet extracted minerals and the secret water I pray to. Poets can bring odd thoughts outdoors. We moved to another town and read there. The rubber tubes of our masks looked like snouts of ancient anteaters dangling down over the pages or phones without being connected. At first it was hard to see the poems through the scratched eye goggles, and then we got the hang of it. We wondered how the gas masks had been used before this, just practice for war or what, since they were sold on the web for $10 each. What happened to our interlocutor? How will he live out his days without poetry, with his features congested by fumes? If I knew his name, I would place it here in the poem instead of this text corrupter. Here is a little spell. We will not meet him again on this earth. We will not meet him on the stairs of hell. We will not meet him in a place unseen. We will not meet him in a wishing well. There are books and beauty where we dwell. We will love each other in a dream. And I'll close with a poem that I wrote during Arab Spring, and it is because it has a reference to modernism, and it is a love poem to my beloved who is here, Bob Hass. And thank you so much again for coming. I'm going to take all these the papers out, and I know Daniela has some books to sell, and thanks again to Chris. This is a lovely opportunity to read in your space. And so it's dedicated to you all who support art. After a very long, difficult day, you talk to your loved ones at night. It is a kind of modernism. Color sees into you, thinks a warm path, a tint of meaning brought from how you feel. Then you are double. The owl calls out, Taito Alba, in your sleep. Scroop, skr, heart-shaped face emitting loose nouns. Under its turf, the smart mouse turns. The fierce dead merge with the recently born, where earlier they emptied what you seek. How will you be known? Some registered complaints. You pass them in the hallway, their new haircuts. The bosses are known by new wars. What salmon are left hurry upstream, cold swaths in the bay. Linnets by rose fire at the edges. Linnet or finch, the word edge has wings made of E. The moon rests in a mantle of minutes, its boundaries in back of the trees. Boundaries are known by their nothings. You will be known by your dreams. Thank you.
All right, then. So that concludes our, what'd you call it, advanced poetry game? Yeah. And now begins the time where you can race home to beat the absent storm, or you can hang out for a while with the art. And let's give it up for Brenda and Daniela.